Hey there everybody, Sage Apopum here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And in this week's post, there was a really great question that recently came up in a student Q&A session, talking about just the state of the world right now, really, and how everything seems to be kind of turned upside down. Everything is changing very rapidly in terms of the picture of human health and what's going on culturally and what's going on the planet as a whole in terms of changes in nature. And it's like, how do we as herbalists change along with it, right? What are the things that we as herbalists can be doing to make sure that our practice of plant medicine is really following the changes that are occurring? You know, one thing that I've always said is that, that new diseases are coming our way, that there's going to be sicknesses and health problems that human beings are going to be dealing with in the years to come that we've never seen before, right? I mean, we've never been exposed to, all of the invisible electromagnetic wavelengths in the air from Wi-Fi and 5G and the internet. And, culture has been moving at a faster and faster pace, and people are sleeping less, their immune systems are lower, stress levels are higher than ever. We're exposed to foods and genetically modified organisms and all this stuff, right, that is new and is changing the state of human health. And I believe it's critically important for us as herbalists to stay as current as we can with these changing times. But how do we do that? How do we come to understand our medicinal plants in light of the changes that are occurring on the planet? And how do we balance that with all of the wealth of traditional knowledge that we base our practice of herbalism from, in the way that these cultures and traditions have used medicinal plants effectively for thousands of years? So how do we move forward in a good way? And so that is the topic of discussion. I thought it was a really, really inspiring question, and it got me thinking about, well, what is the most important thing for us to be focusing on right now, and what is it that we can do as herbalists to really go with these changes, and how can we stay current, and what is the most important thing for us to focus on? So that's what I share about with you in this week's post, and I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully it brings some inspiration and insight and perspectives that really serve you well on your plant path. Winona is asking, the world has changed a lot lately. This is very true. Very quickly too. What do you think is the most important focus for us as vitalist herbalists in the future? Wow, that is a really good question, Winona. I like that question. I like questions where I don't know the answer immediately, and it makes me ponder and reflect on things. Winona, one of the things that I think is really important for the modern day herbalist is for us to stay connected to the plants and connected to nature. One of my herb teachers always said, everything's always evolving, everything's always changing, but the plants are always one step ahead of humanity. Like the plants are always like they're evolving just in front of us because they've been here longer and they understand how to be in balance with the rest of the ecosystem and Gaia, right? Whereas humans don't. We're still kind of struggling with that. And I think in that regard, with all of the changes that are happening, and I've been saying this for years, right? Which is everything's changing. Humanity is affecting nature in really deep and profound ways, and our culture is changing, our technology for sure is changing, and these are all leading to really what I see as like kind of a new type of human being, right? Where we have human beings now that, don't know how to light a fire. They don't know how to find water. They don't know how to identify a simple plant. They've never even been out in a forest. But they really know computers, and they really know their phones, and they really know technology, and they're being bombarded by all these electromagnetic wavelengths that we were never exposed to as children, and they're being raised on genetically modified inorganic foods that a whole generations have never been exposed to since childhood. Like, these are going to lead to new problems in the future. And I've always said this, that there's new diseases coming, there's new health problems coming down in the future that we're going to need to learn how to navigate through. And I believe one of the most important ways for us to know how to navigate through that is by staying connected to nature, by staying connected to the plants, by continuously learning from the plants themselves. And I know this is sounding maybe a little woo-woo or a little esoteric, or but I really believe that is the most important thing. I mean, think about what I was talking about earlier, and how with Mullen, right? And how, the herbalist received that information directly from the plant of use the root for these spinal issues. And no one had ever really done that before. And through that one person, they started doing it, and they helped all these people, and they told other herbalists, and those herbalists helped other people. And all of a sudden this becomes a way of utilizing that plant. And I think with all of the things that are coming and all the changes that are happening, the plants are changing too. Their medicinal properties are changing too. They are evolving. And while it is critically important for us to study traditions and study how and understand how these medicinal plants have been used by various cultures for some thousands of years, like, they really know how to use these plants, right? We got to draw off of that. We can't throw all of that out, but we also can't let that blind us to emergent properties, right? That and this, for those of you that are familiar with Stephen Buhner's work, in The Secret Teachings of Plants, he talks about how communication happens in nature, and how nature is constantly self-organizing, and how there's this process of organisms being entrained with one another. And an organism is entrained to the environment, or all these parts of, even within a single organism, there's all these parts that come together that make up the whole. And when one of those parts becomes perturbed or imbalanced, it throws off the equilibrium of the entire organism, and it has to learn, it has to reshape itself, it has to communicate amongst itself, it has to evolve and learn and grow in order to restabilize and come back into a place of dynamic equilibrium. And what we're seeing on a global scale is this huge perturbation, right, on the whole face of Gaia right now, that the whole earth itself is, and I think a lot of it is due to the way human beings live on the earth, is that we are a part is creating a perturbation to the whole, and there's an imbalance that's happening there. And I believe that's because we are so incredibly disconnected from nature and from what is real, and from the cycles and rhythms of the planet and the intelligence of the natural world. And so the plants are experiencing these perturbations too, right? They're a part of the whole. And so they're learning, they're shifting, they're adjusting their dynamic equilibrium. And I believe Buhner talks about this, that whenever there is a perturbation and there's a restabilization of an organism, there's emergent behaviors. Newness, right? Evolution, change, right? This is really at the basis of what kind of my paradigm of herbalism is all about, right? Evolutionary herbalism. We're constantly being hit with these changes and these perturbations and these shifts. And the more that we can work with the plants to navigate through those, the more we grow, the more we evolve, I believe, on a physical, psychological, emotional, and a spiritual level too. So I think that's one of the most important things that we need to do as herbalists, right? Is stay connected to the plants, stay connected to nature, listen, pay attention. And the more that we can in our own lives align ourselves to nature, align ourselves to the rhythms and patterns of the seasons and the weather and the cycles of nature, right? The more we align ourselves with that, the more we're in harmony with that, the more that we feel a part of this greater level of wholeness. And I think that's where knowledge comes from. I think that's where wisdom is born, is through through following the light of nature, right? And being. That's why I always say the best herbalists are first, foremost, and forever students of nature. And so I would encourage each and every one of you to remember that and to do your best to slow down, that there's this collective whirlwind and it wants to sweep us off our feet, and it wants us to be stressed, and it wants us to be worried, and it wants us to be in a state of fear, and it wants us to be under its control. And I think as herbalists, it's our job to be aware of what's going on over here, but also remember the most important thing, which is being aware of what's going on over here, which is the rest of the planet and the rest of life, which is nature. And so I think that's our job to do that. So really great question, Winona. I really appreciate that. That was enjoyable to talk about.